June 4, 1942, just before dawn, 200 miles northwest of Midway Atoll. The Pacific is calm, too calm. Aboard the Japanese aircraft carrier Akagi, sailors move quietly across the flight deck, boots muffled against steel. The smell of fuel hangs in the air, engines are being warmed. Bombs are stacked neatly beside torpedoes, waiting for the order that will decide the fate of the war in the Pacific. You can almost feel it, the tension beneath the discipline. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto is not here. He commands from far behind the lines, confident his plan is flawless. The American fleet, he believes, will be drawn out like prey. Midway will be the bait. The US carriers will rush to defend it, and then destruction. But among the Japanese commanders on the scene, a quiet unease lingers. Rear Admiral Taman Yamaguchi, commanding the carrier Huryu, studies the horizon and the timetable. Something feels off. The Americans should not be this quiet. No radio chatter, no sightings, too little resistance. Elsewhere in the fleet, intelligence officers had already raised concerns weeks earlier. American codebreakers were not supposed to exist, at least not ones capable of reading Japan's most secure naval communications. And yet somehow US submarines seemed to know where Japanese task forces would be. American patrols appeared in unexpected places. Was Midway really undefended? Some officers dared to suggest the unthinkable. What if the Americans know? The question never reaches Yamamoto in time. At 4:30 hours, Japanese aircraft roar off the decks, lifting into the dark sky toward Midway Island. Bombers and fighters disappear eastward, tasked with softening defenses before the landing force arrives. The plan demands precision. Timing is everything. Minutes later, reports begin to return. Midway is damaged but not destroyed. Airfields are still operational. Anti-aircraft fire was heavier than expected. American aircraft are launching obsolete planes, yes, but they're coming fast and in large numbers. On the carrier decks, commanders hesitate. The reserve strike force is armed with torpedoes prepared for American ships if they appear, but if Midway isn't neutralized, the landing force is at risk. Rearming the planes will take time, precious time. Then comes the report that changes everything. An enemy fleet has been sighted. Not confirmed, not identified. Just a vague contact report from a scout plane that launched late, delayed by minutes that will later feel catastrophic. Is it a cruiser, a carrier, a trick? Nagumo hesitates. Admiral Chuichi Nagumo, commanding the carrier force, faces an impossible decision. Strike Midway again or prepare for a naval battle that might not exist. Rearming begins. Torpedoes are removed. Bombs are brought up. Fuel hoses snake across the decks. Aircraft are moved and repositioned in a carefully choreographed chaos. The decks become crowded, vulnerable. And somewhere beyond the clouds, American pilots are already inbound. Torpedo squadrons from the Hornet, Enterprise, and Yorktown skim low over the waves. Most will not return, they know it. You can hear it in their voices over the radio, fear, resolve, and desperation. One by one, they are cut down by Japanese fighters and flak, but they do their job. They drag the Japanese fighters down to sea level. They scatter the combat air patrol. They keep Nagumo's eyes fixed on the horizon. Above them, unseen, American dive bombers are circling. At 10:20 a.m., the clouds break. And in the next 5 minutes, the Imperial Japanese Navy will lose more than ships. It will lose the war it believed it had already won. June 4, 1942, 10:22 a.m. over the Pacific above the Japanese carrier force. The sky opens without warning. From nearly 15,000 feet, American SBD Dauntless dive bombers suddenly break through the clouds. For a split second, they are ghosts, silent, unnoticed. Then the sun flashes off wings and canopies and gravity takes over. They dive, you can almost hear the air tearing itself apart as they plunge straight down, engines screaming, wings shuddering. Below them, the decks of Akagi Cargo and Soryu are chaos, aircraft lined nose to tail, bombs stacked on wooden carts, fuel hoses still connected. There is no time. Japanese lookouts scream warnings. Anti-aircraft guns snap upward. Fighters try to climb, but they are too low, too slow. The perfect moment, the one Nagumo feared and Yamamoto never saw, has arrived. The first bombs hit cargo. Explosions rip through the flight deck, punching straight into the hangars below. Fueled aircraft erupt like paper lanterns. Flames race along fuel lines. Within seconds, the carrier is an inferno. Then Akagi, a single bomb strikes near the island, igniting torpedoes and armed aircraft packed tightly below deck. The flagship of the Japanese fleet, symbol of Pearl Harbor, symbol of invincibility, is mortally wounded in one blow. Soryu follows. 3 carriers are burning simultaneously. 5 minutes, that is all it takes. Sailors run through smoke and fire, trying to push burning aircraft overboard, trying to flood magazines, trying to save ships already doomed. Orders dissolve into instinct. Some leap into the sea. Others keep fighting, even as steel buckles beneath their feet. Admiral Nagumo watches from Akagi's bridge, stunned. The fleet that carried Japan across the Pacific has been crippled almost instantly. Not by a grand duel, not by overwhelming force, but by timing, chance, and a decision made minutes too late. And then comes the final blow. Huryu, the only undamaged carrier, launches a desperate counterattack. Her pilots strike the American carrier Yorktown, leaving it dead in the water. For a brief moment, hope flickers. Perhaps the balance can still be restored, but American scouts find Huryu. By late afternoon, dive bombers descend again, bombs tear into her deck, fires spread uncontrollably. By nightfall, she too is lost. 4 Japanese fleet carriers gone, over 250 experienced aircrew dead. These were not replaceable men. They were veterans of Pearl Harbor, Coral Sea, and the opening months of the war. Japan's carrier force was not just destroyed, it was hollowed out. As darkness falls, the ocean burns. Wreckage drifts across the water. Survivors cling to debris, watching flames consume ships they believed untouchable. Radios crackle with broken transmissions. Silence follows. In Tokyo, the full truth will be delayed, softened, concealed. But at sea, the realization is immediate. Japan has lost the initiative. And for the first time since December 1941, the Imperial Navy is no longer hunting. It is retreating. Yet the deeper consequence of Midway is still unfolding, one that will not be fully understood until months later, when American factories begin to speak louder than Japanese guns. The morning after Midway is eerily quiet. Smoke still drifts across the Pacific. Wreckage floats where the most powerful carrier force on Earth once sailed. Japanese destroyers move slowly through the debris, pulling survivors from the water, burned, exhausted, silent. There is no victory celebration. Admiral Yamamoto orders a retreat. The operation is over. The objective, luring and destroying the American fleet, has failed completely. Worse, the core of Japan's naval air power is gone. 4 fleet carriers, hundreds of elite pilots, years of training lost in a single day. And unlike the United States, Japan cannot replace them. You can almost feel the shift happen not in one dramatic announcement, but in the quiet understanding spreading through the fleet. The war will not be short. The enemy is not broken, and the advantage Japan seized at Pearl Harbor has slipped away. Across the ocean, the reaction is different. At Pearl Harbor, commanders study the reports in disbelief. The US Navy had entered the battle outnumbered, outgunned, and with only a partial picture of the enemy. And yet Midway has ended with a decisive victory, one that changes everything. From this point forward, American strategy transforms. The US will no longer fight defensively. Island by island, carrier by carrier, the Allies will push westward. The long road through Guadalcanal, the Central Pacific, and eventually to Japan itself begins here. Midway does not end the war, but it ends the illusion. For Japan, the belief in inevitable victory dies in the smoke above those burning decks. For the United States, the realization is just as powerful. This war can be won. And it all came down to a warning that was whispered, a decision delayed, and 5 minutes that reshaped history forever.